An excellent morning to return on your screens to talk about sports developments all across the globe. It is Sports Central brought to you this beautiful day where we see another round of action in the UEFA Champions League returning this night to keep us quite entertained across different centers. We'll also look at what's happening at the ongoing FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup with attention gradually shifting now to African teams and how they're faring, especially in another round of action. We'll take a look at the world of tennis this morning. We'll also, of course, dissect what's happening in the world of course, track and field events. The table tennis competition is still, of course, a very topical conversation in recent times. And we'll also look at some coaches who have actually switched camp left, right, and center, looking forward to a very new and, of course, challenging job ahead of them. I'm Mutame David, and I'm so delighted to return on your screens this morning. But before we look at all of these stories and dissect them extensively, let's first of all bring you up to speed with some big development making rounds in the world of sports. Welcome to the show. The conversation starts from the world of tennis, where Jakub Mensik delivered a dose of drama on Monday at the Swiss indoors Basel, where he overcame fearless home wildcard Henry Bernat 35 minutes after missing his first match point. The 7th seed carved out a 7-6, 6-7, 6-3 victory over the 18-year-old Bernat. The Basel native, who was making his ATP Tour debut after letting slip a match point in the second set tiebreak. Mensik used his experience to regroup and ultimately drowned out the crowd with a clutch serving display to end his first win at the indoor hardcourt ATP 500 event. Bernat, who won this year's Australian Open's boys title, was aiming to become the youngest Swiss match winner in Basel since his idol and record 10-time champion Roger Federer, then 18 years old, in 1999. He out-hit Mensik 27 winners to 23 over the first two sets, but struggled to cope with the Czech star once found his range. Mensik won 94% of first serve points and hit 9 of his total 18 aces in the deciding set. The number 19 player in the ATP rankings awaits the winner of Tuesday's Popcorn match between defending champion Giovanni Pesci Pericard and next-gen ATP star João Fonseca. Away from that, still talking about the world of tennis, but to the WTA scene, Victoria Mboko stunned the tennis world in Montreal with a dreamlike run that ended with the then 18-year-old lifting her first WTA 1000 trophy in front of a home crowd. With a triumph, many overlooked her youth and the likelihood of growing pains as she continued to develop. So when Mboko lost 4 consecutive first-round matches in recent months, speculation swelled that her Montreal title was a fluke. Criticism that ignored the high caliber of her recent opponents. Through it all, Mboko remained focused, confident she would turn things around. As it turns out, all she needed was a return to familiar ground to rediscover that Montreal magic. Back in April, before her rise to stardom, Mboko notched 2 wins at the Billie Jean King Cup on the same court, where she faced fellow Canadian Bianca Andreescu in the first round of the Torrey Pan-Pacific Open on Tuesday. She picked up right where she left off, defeating Andreescu 6-3, 6-3 in just 1 hour and 15 minutes. Her first win since Montreal. Mboko's second-round opponent in Tokyo is the surging Eva Lees, who defeated Katy Bolter 6-2, 6-1 in just over an hour in the first round. Away from that to the table tennis scene, where Nigeria's rising star Matthew Kuti has been named the most improved male player at the 2025 ITT of Africa Championships in Tunis, capping off a breakthrough season that saw him break into the world's top 200 for the first time. The 14-year-old was recognized by the International Table Tennis Federation Africa after a series of impressive displays that helped Nigeria reach the semi-finals of the Continental Showpiece. The Nigeria men's team also received the STAG Fair Play Award due to their sportsmanship in their final group match when they offered to switch from green to red jerseys, even after winning the coin toss, so Morocco could wear their green kits with names in line with tournament rules. QT, who plays with a right-hand shake hands attacking style, achieved a career-high world ranking of 179 in October, his best-ever position. The young Nigerian has been one of the standout performers of the continent this year, winning 42 of his 62 matches across 10 events in 2025, with a total of 4,282 points earned. His standout moment came earlier in the year when he captured the men's singles title at the West Africa Regional Championships in Lagos, defeating top-seeded opponent to win his first major senior crown. Away from that to the world of football, the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations, set to be hosted in Morocco, is expected to become the most financially successful edition in the history of the tournament, with the Confederation of African Football projecting a record profit of $112.84 million. CAF's financial projections indicate a total revenue of $191.63 million, largely driven by robust broadcasting rights deals, high-value sponsorship agreements, and strong ticket sales. Tournament expenditures are estimated at $78.79 million, leaving a historic profit margin that underscores AFCON's status as Africa's premier sporting and commercial event. The 2025 edition, scheduled to run from December 21, 2025 to January 18, 2026, will be staged across 6 Moroccan cities. Morocco is aiming to deliver a world-class experience, showcasing top-tier stadiums and modern facilities in a country widely regarded as one of the continent's most capable sporting hosts. Still talking football, Nottingham Forest have appointed former Burnley and Everton boss Dyche as their new manager. The 54-year-old Englishman, who has signed a contract to run until the summer of 2027, becomes the Forest's third different boss this season. Dyche succeeds Ange Postecoglou, who lasted just 39 days and was sacked 17 minutes after Saturday's 3-0 defeat by Chelsea in the Premier League. Postecoglou did not win any of his 8 games in charge, drawing 2 and losing 6, after he was brought in to replace Nuno Espirito Santo, who was sacked just 3 matches into the campaign. Forest are 18th in the league table after 1 win in 8 games during what has been a difficult start to the season. Dyche's first game will be a Europa League game at home to Porto on Thursday, before Forest are at Bournemouth in the Premier League on Sunday. Well, that's all we have for Sports Wrap-Up at this time. We'll take a very short breather. When we return, we'll have an extensive conversation with the guys also joining the show. Do stay with us.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to another exciting time to talk about the best of stories in the world of sports at a Sports Central. And my name is Blyden Lukem. Exciting times ahead. Well, good to be back as the guys are seated at a table of greatness and ready for the talking point and much that comes with this talking point. Funny Tina in the middle, to David at the far rights of mine, just getting so excited. I've had a conversation today with center around the Champions League and excitement that comes with it. We'll also talk about different preparation for Nigeria. Well, apologies for that break in communication. We're back as if we never left, and we're introducing what a show would have to bring today. And part of a conversation would center around the world of tennis and the beauty of the world of tennis, some of the qualifying games towards the year-end competition. And similarly, we were talking about the world of football. Well, the Champions League takes center stage, a big game to really talk about the narrative and even further the world of Formula One. But David, good morning. So good to be back and so good to see you guys. Really missed you guys yesterday.
Well, a pleasure to return. Of course, UEFA Champions League Day particularly, and many teams who couldn't do well in the domestic league will be looking forward to bounce back in the UEFA Champions League, and it becomes even more difficult now because it looks like we have even more tougher games today than we expect later tomorrow.
Well, funny to that. Good morning.
Son Dyche, now the new Nottingham Forest manager. Some would question the ambition of Nottingham Forest. They're just trying to survive relegation, or they should be building on what was an impressive finish last season. That's the question.
Well, it brings back a line that you always bring. Don't try to fix something that's not bad. And that's basically what happened when Espirito Santos was sacked from the club. And I brought in Ange Postecoglou, never really turned out the way it ought to be. It's that conversation. But quickly, we got to talk about a talking point and move to the world of tennis, where we begin our conversation today. And what better very fact that the next gen ATP superstar, we talk about Mensich getting the better of some big superstars in this one. A top talent, Bernard in Basel. A debut. Well, to start with you, we've talked about the world of tennis. We've seen the Swiss tennis at Basel. We've seen the action that's taking place. Some of these superstars, next-gen superstars, Jakob Mensich delivering a dose of drama on Monday at the Swiss Open.
Well, I think it's quite good because tournaments like this is where you actually see some younger players who've got a whole lot of prospects, do quite well. I could recall still in this Swiss Indoor Basel Open at some point when Federico Soja-Alessime was also a next-gen ATP star. It was from these tournaments that we actually knew much about him, and from there, picked up and of course was actually consistent now. He's been a major name in the ATP scene. And I think, of course, other, tennis players can actually follow suit. For Jakob Mensich, he's been in and around the scene for, some months now, particularly. We've been talking about him in some top-level tournaments, though not too impressive in terms of where he finishes. But I think when a name continues to be quite regular, it rings a bell. And, of course, it might just be quite a regular name we'll get to talk more about next year. So I think for Jakob Mensich, being a next-gen ATP star at the moment, it shows some level of, high-profile quality in the lad and what he's been able to achieve so far and what he will do even more. So I do not actually expect him to be under lots of pressure at the moment. I think it will be one step further, one step at a time for the man Jakob Mensich. And we may just likely see the man become a very regular face and even a more tougher opponent for other players.
A more tougher opening for other players. Let's talk about a man that's been around for a while, Alex de Minaur, the Australian international here. Well, notching a 300 career win in the first Vietnam Open. Well, fun, I'll come to you when you talk about this one now. Not against the biggest of opponents. A 6-4, 6-1 victory against wildcard Rodino, but it counts for something at the ATP 500 tour level event, especially when you have your 300 career win. Big ups for him, but consistency has always been a problem for Alex Alex Domino in recent times. I remember 2 years ago being part of the scene, touted as one of those players that could go even further, challenging with the likes of Nick Kyrgios at the Australian Open. And since then, a little here, a little there, sometimes flashes of him, sometimes out of it.
I'll just take a cue from what UT said. I heard him say Mensik is very young at this point, the next gen star, so you shouldn't pile too much pressure on him. But sometimes that could also play to a disadvantage because you still feel you have time. Before you know you're 27, you've not won a Grand Slam yet. That's just it. I think Alex de Minaur is almost doing in that path because
it reminds me of Marcus Rashford, your friend.
I think Alex de Minaur is someone who, at 300 career wins, you should have something tangible to show for it. When you've gotten off of 300 career wins, it shows that probably you've been winning where it doesn't matter. What happens when you get to Masters competition? What happens when you get to a Grand Slam? That's the question for Alex de Minaur. I think he's at that stage of his career now where he should at least have 1 or 2 Grand Slams to show for it, and there's still nothing. So let's hope that maybe next year could be the year for Alex de Minaur, but I think he still has a long way to go.
Well, many ways for Alex de Minaur to go to Australian International in that regard. You can see him and with career wins 300 for him. Well, many would say many players of his age might have gotten more career win by now, but somehow something positive for Alex de Minaur. But similarly, the likes of Graspo had to stun Kachanov in round 1 of the same competition of Basel Open. And now let's talk about something interesting then. Something interesting would be the race for the ATP final sport with the likes of Casper Ruud and Daniil Medvedev and Aliassime also finding their balance. Still one. Last week with David, we saw a couple of 250 tour level events, and all of them, these 3 had to win those events. And when you look at 5 players, still open for 5 players to make for the touring position, the year-end event, just 3 players qualified now. Just over the weekend, we had Novak Djokovic join them, but we're talking about some of the biggest names: Yannick Sinner, world number 1, Carlos Alcaraz, world number 2. So 5 sports still available.
Alcaraz is world number 1.
Or rather, Carlos Alcaraz, world number 1 now. Yannick Sinner, I'm getting used to Yannick Sinner being world number 1.
He's been there for a long time.
Absolutely, in recent times. So Carlos Alcaraz, world number 1, Yannick Sinner, world number 2. But the truth of the matter is that the top 8, these 3 players not being in that balance, and they're just trying to do catch up and the 250 tour level event, and making the most a situation for them. Something to really look forward to and talk about. And now the challenge continues to who joins Carlos Alcaraz, Yannick Sinner, and Novak Djokovic at the year-end competition.
Well, I think it becomes even more interesting, more intense at the moment because you know, most of those players you've mentioned are actually, you know, finding 250 tour level event or even 500 to, you know, try to stake a claim. Just recently, yesterday, we were talking about Daniil Medvedev, you know, finally winning a title since 2023. And that was an ATP 250 event. Yeah. Basically, still, of course, looking forward to qualify.
Part of the pile of
Absolutely. Still looking forward to qualify for the ATP final. So I think that's the same case for other players who haven't done pretty well at the moment. And if I look at the tennis calendar, I think we still have 1 more. If my memory serves me right, it already started. We still have 1 more ATP event before the ATP finals, particularly takes center stage. So I think I do not know exactly who I will actually stake my claim for. But if you look at the last couple of ATP finals, you know, antecedents will always favor Daniil Medvedev because in as much as we're talking about him not doing quite well in terms of winning titles, he's always there qualifying for the ATP finals. So I think from my last couple of experience, the last few years, I think Medvedev will be my favorite player, you know, to join the others for the ATP finals. That's what I'm looking at the moment. But it will be quite intense, particularly for other players who are also looking forward to that slot as well.
Well, just to keep from that, I think last week we had 3 ATP 250 events at the same time. I think it's just poised for, you know, a very hectic run into the ATP finals because now we're going to have more superstars trying to stake claim. Now, this week we have 2 ATP 500 events, 1 in Basel, 1 in Vienna. So it shows you that anything can happen. You can be, you know, overthrown from your position. For Daniil Medvedev, I think as of last month, he was out of the top 20 in the ATP rankings. That's to show you how bad his situation got. But the man
came back to around 11th there.
He's 12th currently. He's 12th currently. So when you see what he's been able to do, I think he's kind of making that final push to go to the ATP finals. He's gone there 7 consecutive times. 7 consecutive. But I'll just say maybe this time is the year where we see Daniil Medvedev not making it because I look at that points difference. I think he's about 500 a point away from the man who sits currently in number 8. That's what's his name now? I've forgotten the name, but he sits 500 points away from that particular person, and that person is still, currently in competition. So for Daniel Medvedev, I think it's going to be a tall tax for him, a very tall tax for him.
Well, before we get to leave tennis conversation, I'll give you the rankings, and we'll see where they're positioned in the rankings. But still in the world of tennis, we're going to talk about all of these and be so excited about it as it comes. And quickly, guys, one of those conversations, as we're talking about more schedule and more chances for a tennis player to qualify for the year-end competition, there's also this lopside of it, just like it's happening in football, a scheduling problem. Many players are talking about it, say, come on, the games are too many. Jack Trapper, in particular, also talking about it. He's injured. Ogeron is injured. Who else is injured? We're talking about the likes of, I'm trying to get the numbers now, Emma Raducanu, compatriot, also injured. Well, Novak Djokovic has gone through his fair share of it this particular year, and there's that conversation, and he's saying, look, because of the scheduling, that's why players are also getting more injured. Let's try and avoid this now. So they're saying that the Tennis Federation will have to look at the calendar year and work it out at the end of it. But the other argument, funny thing, I'll start with you on this one now, would always be what we've talked about it before on the show.
I first mentioned it, the scheduling, before even the players.
Take it easy with we also talked about it when you mentioned it. The players also talked about it. I think one of the arguments that came from one of those arguments also in the course of all of this has been the speed of the court. They're also saying, look, the likes of Roger Federer are really complaining about it. The speed of the court is slowing down. It doesn't make it so interesting. So players are playing virtually on all the courts and they're almost the same thing even on hard courts these days, that there should be demarcation in terms of the speed of the court. But key conversation when you talk about it is the scheduling is you have options. There are other games you need to participate in. You don't have to participate in all of them.
Well, the thing is that when you are a top superstar, probably you rank number 12, and then you didn't do so well at Grand Slams, you'd always try to pick those 250 events, 500 events where you shouldn't be part of them.
So but if here's the other argument, if the competitions that are many, what happens? Well, you just go through a few same concern.
I understand Jack Draper. He was seeded 8 before he got that injury. He would have probably made it to the ATP finals, but because of that injury, he's out throughout the rest of the year. Currently, he's out of, I think he's at number 10 currently now in the ATP ranking. So when you look at it, it's very disheartening for a player like Jack Draper. This would have been his first year.
You think the scheduling is the problem? They got injured. He could have gotten injured even with less.
Almost everyone has had to deal with injuries this season, apart from Yannick Sinner, who was out for I think 3 months due to that ban. Almost everyone, we talk about Carlos Alcaraz, Novak Djokovic, maybe Alexander Zverev, not really heard about injuries to him. But when you look at it, if every player has had to deal with injuries, then the scheduling is definitely a problem.
Well, to David, let's also look at the argument. You started by saying you said it first before the players. But here's the other argument. Just like we're having last weekend, we had 250 tour levels at different places. You can choose not to participate in it because if there are fewer games, it's still the same level of competition. You choose not to participate. Now there are more games that gives you option to participate in this one and have options to participate in the other one and not participate in this one. So the argument of scheduling shouldn't be a thing because you have choices. No one is forcing you to say mandatory performance. You have to perform in this game.
This is the conversation now, not basically about, 2 tour level events happening at the same time. It is basically about having a competition scheduled, let's say 2 days after the other.
You can have a break.
That's what we're saying. Now you have
no one is forcing you to.
I'm going somewhere. You have a 1,000 Masters event, happening between the span of this week, finishes on Saturday. On Monday, we're actually starting another 500 tour level event where you also know that we'll definitely have big superstars attend that event. It doesn't have to be that way. So if you give a player a 1 week break, then another big tournament comes up, that's okay for me. I think that's what the players are looking at the moment. Yes, we have different, at the moment we have, think about the 2 or 3 different tour level events, 250, 500. You can actually choose where to actually attend. But when you have these, tournaments, this one finishes and then 2 days after another one starts, it doesn't make any sense. And that's why I pinpointed when Igor Swiatek had that injury. And I said, come on, we have so many tour level events. We have so many tournaments. The Billie Jean King Cup will start, I think, few days after the ATP finals, or maybe before the, I've actually forgotten, but I think it's still in November. Sure. And Yannick Sinner said he's not participating in the Billie Jean Cup for Italy.
Well, that's what we're saying then.
That's because of the scheduling, because it's so close. It's so close.
All right, let's bring the conversation to another level, because you're standing on that side. I'm coming from this side now. here's the conversation. If you span the days, what happens? It means you're going to have fewer tournaments.
It doesn't matter.
If you have fewer tournaments,
this is it.
Means, let me give you perspective so you come in. If you have fewer tournaments, it means you're going to have less money that players can vent for.
No,
yes,
I'm going somewhere.
It's true.
Now,
if
now
we
look
do
at
that,
it now.
no, let me just finish
Okay.
so you can come in and
right.
we'll wrap it at once. If we do that, it therefore means that the top guys are going to go for more of the lesser tournaments available, and they're going to win it. The smaller guys are not going to have money throughout the year.
They'll still have tournaments to play.
How?
Just like I said before, between last month and this month, we've had more 250 events, more 500 tour level event. Some of them starting at the same time. Some of them, or most of them, starting at the same time. Those are competitions where you see next gen ATP stars, where you see players outside the top 50 participate. Now, my concern basically is the fact that a Grand Slam, a 1,000 Masters, a 500 tour level event, those are big tournaments. You shouldn't be starting 2 days or 3 days after the end of another tournament. That's what I'm saying. So if you have a 1,000 Masters ending, and then we have, let's say, 1 week break before a 500 tour level or 1,000 Masters event starting another, it creates that break for players to recuperate and then transition to the next tournament. That's my concern at the moment. Okay. It doesn't stop other tour level events to hold. Okay, other tour levels will hold, and then other players will still participate.
Your points are clear, but the angle is the players have a choice themselves, either not to participate in the next 500 tour level event and have the break and go for the next, because
there's no way you won't have a top player want to participate in 500 event. That's a big tournament.
Novak said, I'm taking
Novak said that because he knows his body can't carry it anymore.
That's the point.
He's not even fighting for anything.
It's causing you injuries. Take some break. That's the point we're making. And because, come on, the calendar is chopped up, and it gets interesting because it can reach everybody. More money, because the more you keep the space, you're going to seal the calendar, meaning you have to reduce some tournaments. That's the way I look at it.
I think it's not basically about reducing tournament, because if you look at the tennis calendar here, it stops in November. So what happens in December? You can actually, of course, put games in December. Just ensure that there are scheduled break.
Rest.
You have football in December.
Come on, they need to rest.
We have football in December.
They've been going through the year, beginning of the year till the end.
Same with football as well.
Has a window where they rest. A window where they rest.
And that's what tennis also have.
Not necessarily.
No, tennis also have.
From the beginning of the year till that's the only rest they have.
Yeah, they have the resting.
That's the only time they have.
I think the only reason why we've had a lot of injuries this year is that the competition is very tough. That's why players like Carlos Alcaraz will have to compete at very 500 level event. Normally, you'd have top superstars
just to catch up the numbers.
Exactly, that's just it. So it's nobody's fault.
Back to be
the players have to be there. So that's just it. I don't think the calendar should be reviewed or anything. I don't think so. I feel it's normal.
If they just have to make the changes, because the other question would be, they've been playing with this sort of calendar over the years.
Exactly.
What's the biggest concern now? Is it that we're having more new tournaments
coming in? We're having more competition. That's what we haven't actually observed.
And even when they're supposed to hold on a bit, even when they're supposed to take a break, they're going for what's the Kings tournament to make lots of money.
That's for their money for the big superstars.
So they always go for the money. That's it. That's why they're not taking the break, because they want to go for the money. Nothing else. Not even the ranking point. The next money that's coming at the end of it. Well, before we get to go on that break, just a touch on what are we missing now? It would be Formula One. Well, Laila Fernandez can't stop winning in Japan. We've seen the performance of Laila Fernandez. Absolutely.
She had to endure a 4.5 hour train drive to the next competition. She just finished in Osaka and had to go to Tokyo. So that's what we're talking about. Scheduling. She could have just sat out of it.
Yeah, sat out of it.
Nobody's forcing her to be part of it.
She's going to make money, she knows. She's going to make money at the end of it, she knows. Well, Formula One, the last talking point from non-football before you get to talk about football stories, it will be the fact that Max Verstappen is piling pressure on McLaren drivers. We're talking about the likes of Piastri and Norrie. Well, the United States Grand Prix tournament was what we had to talk about. Well, leading the pack in this one ahead of some of these superstars. Norrie and Piastri finished second and fifth in that regard. For I just put us to some clarity. And the likes of Ferraris, we talk about Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton also finding that balance in between in this one.
Well,
what transpired?
Out of the last 3 Grand Prix, Verstappen Verstappen has won 2 of them. So it almost looks like a leg surge for the man now. He's trying to appel the pressure on Piastri and the man, what's his name now, Lando Norris, who've been doing quite well at the beginning of the year. But recently they've actually, they've faltered the alliance, especially for the leader, Lando Norris, because he's not won out of the last 3. He's not won any of them. So it almost looks to see Verstappen is trying to push up now. He's getting very closer to them. You might just see Verstappen winning at the end of the year.
Well, Jimmy David, possibly kind of see it happen, a change happen in terms of those who ranking Verstappen going all the way to win it. It started so slowly, but now it seems like a house on fire.
Well, I do not know what exactly is wrong with the team McLaren, because
Competition between both of them.
when you have competition between, you know,
They're
your
supposed to
teammates,
help each other.
yeah, you're supposed to help each other climb the table, climb the ladder. So when you start having that in-house competition, it certainly means other opponents will come catching. So however Team McLaren wants to do at the moment, they have to ensure that they hold firm, stay grip at the top. Otherwise, Max Verstappen, who's more experienced, will definitely reach the constructor title at the end of the year.
Well, the current champion, Max Verstappen, absolutely phenomenal. This year has not been the best of years for him because it's always starting small, it's always starting strong. But so far, he's beginning to build that momentum. Will he leapfrog the McLaren team and go all the way to win it at the end of it? Or still going to be difficult for him. We might still see a slowdown in the few races that are remaining for him to compete and complete. Well, a story for another day. We'll give indices to it probably tomorrow and look at further traction in the world of Formula One. But now we'll have to go on a quick break, and when we're back, there will be football stories all around the world. And we'll talk about Eagles friendly that has been cancelled due to the playoffs. We're going to look at the playoffs in details, another conversation. The Under-17 World Cup, Women's World Cup taking center stage, and we'll be a part of the conversation. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back at Sports Central. My name is Blyden Kim. Funny to David, tuning me for company. Going nowhere. And now we're going to talk about football stories around the world and the drive that comes with football, the intensity of it. And quickly from the world of football, according to information we're hearing from the NFF, the Nigeria is set to open early training camp in Rabat, Morocco, ahead of 2026 World Cup playoffs. They'll begin training camp in Rabat on November 9th, ahead of the 2026 FIFA World Cup African playoffs. In similar vein, we also hear from the NFF that dropping all of this confirmation that the U.S. Eagles friendly that will be taking place in the United States of America. The Eagles were set to have a friendly against Venezuela and Colombia in the United States of America. It's been cancelled following that playoffs. Well, time not fully enough. Well, we hear also from the Falconets camp and that Cesar Oshola, the six-time African Footballer of the Year, and Demehin rather, and some of the superstars, about 9 players, are already in Lome ahead of the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations final qualifying first leg clash against Benin Republic. 9 players in camp now, including 6-time African champion Cesar Oshola. Well, guys, tournament, we'll get to talk about the women's game soon, but just a flash on the Super Eagles, the playoffs now. First game against Gabon. I know it's a long walk, but many people are looking at the Super Eagles qualify as the teams that are available for the playoffs. And when you talk about it, I think no European team in there. So we're talking about Bolivia from South America. I think they are the strongest team in the list of teams available for the playoffs. It seems like one, if Super Eagles pay attention, enough attention, they can qualify. Many are saying the toughest playoff is from Africa. After, if they get a bit Gabon, then it could be the winner between DR Congo and Cameroon.
I think for me, the only team I'm looking at the continent of Africa who maybe could also give Nigeria a good run would be Cameroon if they eventually make it to the final playoffs against Nigeria. I do not think Gabon are that team that can actually pose that serious threat against Nigeria.
That amounts good point during the playoffs.
Sorry?
That amounted good points, 21 points during the group stage of it.
Yeah, we could also look
at Aubameyang being so fantastic.
The quality of teams they actually played in the group stage could also count for something. So I think Nigeria should be able to get the best of Gabon. Going to the intercontinental playoff shouldn't be a problem because I actually look at the quality of teams who will also be playing right there. If Nigeria are quite serious, if their priorities are right, and they really want to qualify, those teams shouldn't be a problem for Nigeria.
Well, Trevor David saying teams and intercontinental playoffs shouldn't be a problem. We're looking at the likes of Bolivia and some of the Oceania countries and in that direction, and Asian countries in that direction. Well, it would be an unfolding conversation to really talk about moving forward. Well, part of the conversation in the world of football would be the fact that Nottingham Forest have appointed Sean Dyche to replace Ange Postecoglou. Is that conversation, a 54-year-old who started out as a trainee at the City Ground in the late 1980s, has signed a contract running until the summer of 2027 at the City Ground. Unfortunately, it seemed like a longer term kind of contract, 2 years for him, not a tryout. Sean Dyche, most often than not, are brought in for a relegation battle. You mentioned it, but now Nottingham Forest, a team that was under ascendancy, and now seem like they're a team that are cautious about relegation.
Well, despite the fact that I would give the man Evangelist Marinaki some stick for sending Nuno Espirito Santo, I would also give him some credit for being able to identify that right now we're not even fighting for Europe again. We have to fight relegation first. That because you not bring Sean Dyche if you want to fight for European sports. So he's identified the problem.
The season is still early. Probably it could have been a better choice of a coach. You never can tell what could happen. What's been the difference from last season? Well, just a coach leaving them.
Sean Dyche and Nuno Espirito Santo play almost a similar kind of football. If you look at the average possession garnered in games played by Nuno Espirito Santo, they had less than 50%. Same thing with Nuno Espirito Santo. But for Ange Postecoglou, he plays a more proactive kind of football. So it was always going to be a difficult start for Ange Postecoglou without a preseason because he never had a preseason. He just came in and with players who were comfortable with always sitting back. Last season we saw Nottingham Forest comfortable with just sitting back because they had a very good defense, a very strong keeper. He won the Golden Glove Award as well, Matt Sales. So when you look at the Nottingham Forest side, I think they would play better under Sean Dyche. It's closer to what they had under Nuno Espirito Santo and what they had under Ange Postecoglou.
Well, the mentality could be a factor even further, especially when one coach plays totally cross and knock, but the pressing totally different from Nuno Espirito Santos. Well, Graham Porter takes up the Swedish job. Wicks after a West Ham sacking. Well, today we're looking at Graham Potter said not so good. Sweden, and when it has to do with Euro qualification for the 2026 World Cup, not so good. Sack that coach, and Graham Potter seemed the man on a rescue mission for them.
Well, I think I'm actually smiling because I look at the job ahead of for Graham Potter. It looks pretty difficult at the moment for a side who've actually played 4 World Cup qualifiers with just 1 point. That means 1 draw out of 4 games. It certainly shows you how poor the Swedish national team are at the moment, and how, of course, eager they want redemption. But is Graham Potter the man to give them redemption? I still do not think so at the moment, because the national team assignment is quite different from club football, where you get to have your players week in, week out. The only time we'll have, of course, access to his player would be the next international break, which will be if a World Cup qualifies for Sweden. So how does he tend to, of course, come in at the side and revive them to a more winning side in just a space of 2 training days before a major match? So I think that's where my problem is at the moment. But the man, he shows he was just eager to return back to coaching. And I just wish him good luck, but I do not think he's the man for the job.
But David doesn't think he's the man for the job. We'd have to try and squeeze in time to talk about the Champions League taking place today, and about the U.S. soccer team. They've announced a co-host of 2031 Women's World Cup bid. We're going to talk about it in the coming days. Quickly to the Champions League before we get a close. Barcelona are some of the biggest games to talk about. We'll be taking Olympiacos, and we're talking about Arsenal against Atletico Madrid. The Atletico Madrid players had already complained after the first training day that there was no hot water at the stadium, and they're saying, come on, they should have provided with hot water. Well, Newcastle United take on Benfica. Jose Moreno talking about the fans at Newcastle United, saying how interesting and powerful, always loving to go to that playground. And Villarreal against Manchester City. Valentina, which of these games stand out for you and why?
Well, definitely Arsenal against Atletico Madrid is the biggest pick of the day. In fact, the biggest pick of this week's Champions League encounter. So I think Arsenal would have to show that they are ready to compete against the best teams. I'm very happy that now it comes at a very early stage. Last season we had Arsenal, the only big team they faced in the, let's say, the group phase, or what do they call it now, that phase of the first phase of the Champions League was Paris Saint-Germain. So now they get to face Atletico Madrid. So it's also going to serve as a, let's say, a preamble to what they would face when they get into the knockout phase. So good for them. Let's see how the level of performance they give against Atletico Madrid would determine if they're ready to go all the way in the season's Champions League.
Well, interesting one to talk about. Well, Barcelona against Olympiacos shouldn't be a difficult one. I'm looking for a difficult one for Tuba David. Villarreal against Manchester City. Thomas Partey in this one.
Villarreal doing quite well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Top 4 in the Spanish Liga.
Man City, you worry about Man City's form in recent times. They're scoring lots of goals to Erling Haaland in good form.
It shouldn't be quite a difficult game for Manchester City, because I think in the last couple of weeks they have been able to get back their mojo, their goal scoring boots, and they've also been winning games. The last 3 matches we've actually seen them win convincingly, so I think they would absolutely ride on that same confidence. But I think I'm looking at the Newcastle Benfica game. Jose Moreno back now to England. Eddie Howe has been talking tough about the high profile Jose Moreno and how far he's been actually successful in his managerial career. But I think Newcastle at the moment should be ready. Well, off the back of that defeat in the English Premier League, their last match, I think Benfica will be a very difficult game for them to win. But I'm looking forward to it later tonight.
Well, we got to see. We can't really start talking about who wins it or not. We'll wait till I want to get to the tougher position at the table. We'll get to do lots of that. But Amalfi take on Pavos in this one. Bayer Leverkusen against Paris Saint-Germain. Union Saint-Gilles against Inter. And Copenhagen against Borussia Dortmund. Well, we're talking about PSV Eindhoven against Napoli. And those are the other games that are taking place today in the Champions League. We'll always talk about a Champions League the way it ought to be. Guys, we have many champions being part of this week today doing the analysis. So Tuba David, Valentina, champions in their own right. Thank you for being a part of the show.
A pleasure.
Valentina.
Always a pleasure to be here.
All right, we have to bounce. Time is up for us. Tomorrow is another day. My name is Blyden Kim, and we say ciao, ciao.